2, 1. We're live. Hi, everybody, and Happy New Year to everyone out there. 2018, we have a super moon. This is the year of the dog. Like, can it get any better for us dog lovers out there? This is going to be an amazing year. I want to welcome you to the Dog is Good Lifestyle Show. I'm excited to kick off the first one of the entire year with like a little safety net for all of us. We're going to have a great topic regarding litigation, or avoiding litigation, I should say, as it relates to the interactions that we have with our pets, not us with our pets, but the relationships that we have with, people and professions and where we live, all those things that can go on. So we'll talk more about that in a second. But as you are hopping on board, as always, I want to know who you are, where you are from. If you had a great holiday, I'm sure your dogs just racked it up in terms of the gifts, I'm sure. I'm loving, for all of you who are fans of ours and are on the Dog is Good Lifestyle group, I love all your posts with the gifts that people, that you gave to your dogs, and your dogs, all their cute photos of the holidays. It's so great. But I don't know about you guys, but I would be perfectly fine if I did not see another cookie or a piece of chocolate for a really long time. I'm done with the sugar at holiday. Everybody buys that for me. It's kind of funny. And I actually do have a very bad sweet tooth, so I wish that people didn't, but I will say I enjoyed it during the holiday, and now it's time to get back to business, right? So anyway, we do have a giveaway, as we always do every week, and I want to share with you what that is. I want you to enter to win. So we have a Love the Mutt, You're With t-shirt. And I must say, this is, it's a pretty blue, actually. It's really soft, you guys. This is a really nice one. And then my favorite, I Cannot Live Without My Dog. And just to give you a real quick story on this one, this dog, this silhouette, is actually one of my dogs. And we created this after she passed away. Because as most of you have experienced as well, or, it's devastating. And for a while there, I couldn't quite live without my dog. So anyway, that is available for you guys. And to find out who won, you have to join the Dog is Good Lifestyle group. It's a private group. And actually, you guys are so awesome in the group. I love how active you are in communicating with each other, and it's been great. It's really fun for me. So excited about that. So you can enter at the link below. And then just one other little bit of housekeeping is your Fur Covered Wisdom. If you have not signed up for that, please do. We'll put in a link for that. Kicking off the new year in the right way with all the wisdom that you could possibly receive each week from your favorite creature in the whole world, your very own dog. It comes to you in your inbox directly from your dog to you. And we're getting some great feedback on that. So I hope that you will enjoy that and share, and encourage other people to share. So anyway, yes, tell us where you are from as you're popping in, and we will get right down to it. Debra and I have been trying to connect on this interview for quite some time, and we finally were able to get our schedules in sync so we can make this happen for you guys. But she is such an expert at what she does, and it's such important information for all of us dog owners and dog lovers to have. So I wanted to kick this year off with Debra, and I know you guys will find great value. And hi, Brittany. Yay, joining from Idaho. And oh, by the way, Debra did just tell me what is coming your way on the East Coast. I'm sorry. We're going to, button down the hatches for you over here as well. So I'm going to give you, first off, welcome, Debra. I want to thank you for joining. And I'm going to read you guys her bio, and we're going to dive right into this important topic of mediation. So Debra Hamilton is the principal at Hamilton Law and Mediation, the first solo mediation practice in the U.S. dedicated to helping people resolve conflicts involving animals. HLM uses alternative dispute resolution, or ADR, to help resolve conflicts ranging from divorce disagreements over the family pet to helping animal rights advocates see the benefit of sitting down with their adversaries and having a mutual discussion before, during, and after litigation is initiated. Debra also works with pet service providers and professionals to help them pursue their passion of helping people and their pets while reducing their exposure to costly litigation. So if you are a pet sitter, pet walker, groomer, veterinarian, or you know of these people, you want to share this important conversation that we're having today, because you definitely want to be, protected before you even operating in your business. She presents programs that teach people how to communicate without resorting to litigation all over the country. Debra is the go-to person for information regarding the use of mediation in disagreements over animals for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the Chicago Sun-Times, Bloomberg, and the U.S. News and World Report. Debra also hosts a free monthly online webinar teaching pet owners how to create and implement a simple, short, and long-term pet care plan. The MAP plan, M-A-A-P, enables beloved companion animals to get the care their owners want them to have anytime their owner is personally not able to care for them. Debra graduated from Benjamin and Cardozo Law School in 1983 and was admitted to practice in New York in 1984. So, Debra, thank you.
You're very welcome, Gil. I'm so glad to be here. And yes, indeed, we're lucky we're doing this today, because I might not have internet tomorrow with 50-mile-an-hour winds coming in with the nor'easter to New York. So yay.
I feel for you, but I am grateful. And I'm just going to tout it up to, it is the year of the dog. So everything that's supposed to happen is going to happen.
Absolutely.
So,
and all of us love dogs. So it's, it's a group thing.
It is. And I met Debra at a women's professional network for women in the pet industry, WIPIN. And if you guys are out there who are in the pet industry, it is a great organization to be a part of and to connect with very, high-level entrepreneurs in all different areas. We collaborate on a number of things, and I really appreciate the fact that you're here with us today. So let's, one of the things that I am most curious about, you've been practicing law for 30 years, or had been practicing for 30 years before you switched into this very niche and specialized form of mediation. Why? What prompted that shift?
Well, it's funny you should ask. So I was an assistant district attorney here in Westchester County. I then went in to be an assistant inspector general for the MTA, which is the biggest transportation organization, corporation like in the world. So I was part of the inspector general. We did all the review. I was a trial geek. That's what I loved. And then I took a few years off to raise my children. And when I went back to the practice of law, I started my own practice, which was great because I would help people who would get in conflict over animals. And let me tell you, Gila, they would spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to prove they were right. And so I would just take one side or the other and help them prove they were right. And I had one case that was the case that made me hang up my litigation pumps. I never have litigated since that day. And it was a woman who called me who had adopted a Cocker Spaniel from a rescue. And that she had adopted from them before, so they knew her. They had never followed up with her. She had always, passed by, dropped in, whatever, and she heard that a bunch of dogs were coming up. So she adopted a female dog, maybe she was 3 or 4, who had been brought up from Texas. And when she couldn't get the dog over a urinary tract infection, she brought it to her own vet. They let her take it home without it being spayed because they thought it had a urinary tract infection. They had given it its rabies shot, all of its up-to-date shots. So this dog had been vaccinated out the wazoo when it came up from Texas, which is what rescues do to make sure the dogs are healthy and leave protected. Mm-hmm. And she brought the dog to the vet, and the vet said, well, she doesn't have a urinary tract infection. She's pregnant. And my client, being the good person she was, called the rescue and said, listen, I just want to let you know that the girl you sent home with me isn't suffering from a urinary tract infection, but rather she's pregnant. And the rescue, instead of thinking, oh, well, what are we going to do, said, well, those puppies belong to us and we're coming to take the dog back today. And she'd had the dog for 2 weeks. She had just gotten it to be housebroken. The dog wasn't going to have puppies for another 4 to 5 weeks, so she could have kept it, nurtured it, taken care of it, bonded with it. She had no intention initially to whelping that litter of puppies, not on this planet or any other planet. But Monday morning, she got a summons and complaint on her doorstep from a very large law firm in New York City that said they were going to come and take the dog back because she had signed the contract, which if anyone reads the contracts they sign for dogs they adopt, it usually has the clause that says they can come on your property and take the dog back if they think the dog isn't being taken care of in a safe manner. And so that's the clause they decided to pull the dog back with. And I tried my hardest because I had been in the PTA and learned, I don't know how many of you are part of the PTA, but you can't get mothers to do anything unless you make them think it's their idea. So I was good at that. I was the vice president of the PTA. So I became good at that when I went back to litigation. And try as I might to talk to the law firm, they'd never speak to me. They told me the dog belongs to the rescue. I'm not talking to you. Hit the bricks, blah, blah, blah. So we went to court, and long story short, I won. My client got to keep the dog and the puppies. And when the judge turned to me and said, Mrs. Hamilton, what do you want? I said to him, I understood that the rescue really wanted to protect the dogs, but it would have been so much more effective for them to have had a conversation with her and helped her whelp this litter, as opposed to really making it so difficult. I walked out of court. I stood on the court steps in Queens, New York, and if anybody's ever been there, that's not the prettiest place to stand. And I said, there has got to be a better way than this, because nobody was served. This woman would never adopt from this rescue again, and she was a repeat adopter. These people used free legal representation in a way it was never meant to be used, because this wasn't an abuse situation. So that's when I hung up my litigation pumps, and I became a student of Jack Himmelstein, Gary Friedman in mediation, which is a practice where instead of running to the courthouse, you actually sit down with a person in a room with the two people who are at odds and have that person enable conversation, even if you think, because I have a lot of people who come to my mediations and go, they're never going to listen to me. They've never listened to me. And by the end, they go, my God, how did you get them to listen to me? And I said, because we're all here wanting to tell our stories, and you got to tell your story, and I got to tell my story, and they got to tell their story, and they felt as if they were heard. Because what happens in conflicts over animals mostly is it's emotional driven. It's all about the emotion. And if you can have that story told, you can avoid so many relationship destruction, you can avoid litigation, and you can actually find out what's best for the animal, which is always lost when ego gets involved. So I don't litigate anymore, I only mediate.
Well, that is such a powerful story on so many ways, mostly in that, how new things come to fruition is a situation and stepping out of that and saying, there has to be a better way. This will be different. So kudos for you for just, taking that, note from the universe, if you will, and turning this into what is now a very large and successful practice, helping so many people. And you're so right. Because not only is there so much emotion involved, but everybody, once they have their opinion, their side, their thoughts, their feelings attached to that, it becomes a real challenge to listen effectively to the opposition, if you will. So now you explained what a mediator is, which is good, because I know people understand the word, but they may not understand what that might look like, getting the two parties together. And you specialize in so many areas within this. Like, I'm going to break them into the categories that you have, and I want to talk a little bit about that because I know people out there are possibly having this experience presently or may encounter it in the future, so they'll know what to do. So let's, actually of the four, which I'll list them, you had family pet conflict, so things that are going on within the family, maybe as it relates to divorce or somebody passing away, people fighting over who gets the pet, kind of thing. Housing conflicts, this is probably pretty popular with landlords and condos and home associations, breeder-owner animal conflicts, and then the professional conflicts with veterinarians, groomers, what else? Dog walkers, trainers, pet sitters, etc. So of those, which are the cases that people come to you the most frequently for?
The first and foremost, well, they're tied actually, is the client's dissatisfaction with their veterinarian or their groomer or their dog walker. So it's the service-oriented people who there's this little tiny issue that blows up because people don't have the skill to listen. In my book that I wrote, Nipped in the Bud, Not in the Butt, part of the things that I teach are 3 steps: stop, drop, and roll, which we all know from being on fire. When you're in conflict, you're on fire. So my process in my classes and my programs that I put out there teach you how to stop talking and listen, drop the need to be right, and then let what somebody says roll off your back. And people go, how can I do that, Debra? And I go, well, let's put it this way. Nobody can hear you when they're angry anyway. So if you try to talk to someone, if I tried to talk to you, Gila, and you were so angry at me, you would not hear what I was saying for understanding. You would hear what I was saying so you could respond. And that's a whole different path. That's the negative path you go down. So when you're a pet service provider, veterinarian, dog groomer, dog walker, baby, not babysitter, sorry, dog sitter, kennel, groomer, anybody, when you have a disagreement, you need to take a step back and let the person actually vent, even if they're 100% wrong. Let them vent. Emotion is what is going to throw you into the middle of a quagmire you don't want to get out, don't want to get involved with. And if you listen first, you're going to know more about what's bothering them than if you try to defend yourself at that point. So in mediation, that's what we do. We allow everyone to tell their story. But if you're not in mediation, if you're having somebody unload at the front desk, these are tasks and tips I give so that you can really protect yourself, because I don't want anybody to be abused by anyone verbally or physically, but also enable people to understand that you're listening to them, that you're hearing them, that you're appreciating what they're saying. Appreciation does not mean you agree. The only letters that appreciate and agree have in common are the letters A-R-E. And we are going to work this out if we listen first and talk second. Now,
I just want to highlight that because it's such a critical point. People often have a very difficult time just being quiet. They want to immediately respond and share or react to what you're saying, and then it does become a problem. So I'm really glad that you brought that up as a first key point, because especially in a service-based business, it's very easy to take something somebody says and just internalize it as though it's 100% about you, and it's really not about you as much as it is about the other person and their interpretation of what they've just experienced.
Right. I always say that intent and impact could be 100 miles apart. So what you say you may have intended as a compliment, and because of somebody else's history, it impacted them differently, and they might go off the deep end. I taught a course at the New York State Cornell vet school during their conference, and one of the vets stood up and said to me, I learned that when I held my finger up to a client to listen to her cat's heart. And she went into orbit and told my boss I should be fired because how dare I hold my finger up to her. And this veterinarian said, I had no idea doing that one thing would set this woman off. And so you learn these things in the scheme of things. Every pet professional knows that pet owners wear their hearts on their sleeves. That's part of why they bring them to all the caregivers for the animals. They don't leave them tied in the backyard. They bring them places. It's a $70 billion industry, the care of pets. So you know that these people are going to be emotional, that animals are no longer property, that they are parts of our family, they're our companions. They provide us with emotional support. Some of them provide us with additional services if we're diabetic, if we're epileptic, if we suffer from PTSD. So animals are an intricate part of the fabric of our lives. But if you are servicing those animals, you really need to just take a step back if you can. And sometimes, we're all human. Sometimes I can't take a step back. I know it's hard to believe, but sometimes I can't take a step back. And in the back of my mind, I'm saying stop, drop, and roll, and I can't do it myself. But really, if you breathe and take a step, you can listen first. And then if you can, drop the need to be right first. Because what happens is, I just have to tell you, I hear what you're saying, but I'm right. I hear what you're saying, but this is what really happened. I hear what you're saying, but I tell my veterinarians, I tell all of the pet service provider conferences that I speak to, please remove the word but from your lexicon. Say, I hear you, period. Sit there, be quiet, listen. I hear you. I appreciate what you're telling me. It's important to my business that you let me know this, period. Because they can't hear you. So if you just take a minute and let them as my mother would say, dump their bucket.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't add lighter fluid to the bucket stuff and light a match, they'll run out of fuel. They'll run out, and then you'll say, you know, I always say to my veterinarians who want to choke the life out of people who, if they've saved their dog, have a problem with them or with the bill, I say to them, you know what you want to say? The canned answer is, you have given me so much food for thought, and I want to really appreciate and acknowledge how hard it might have been for you to do this, and how my entire staff and I appreciate you telling us how you perceived our practice. Mm-hmm. And would it be all right if I slept on this overnight and we talked about it tomorrow? Because not only does it let you not have to answer then, where you're going to say something that may or may not be helpful, but it also gives them time to calm down. So that's why dropping the need to be right is so important, and letting what they say roll off your back. What's the old adage, Gila? Sticks and stones will break my bones and names will never hurt me. Well, in mediation, that's what we address. We address the sticks and stones that they're throwing, and we recognize that if we address them, they're not going to hurt us. We're going to hear about them. We're going to be able to, with the neutral in the room, because in mediation, there's always a neutral in the room who keeps a safe space for both sides. And the other benefit of mediation, which I love, and which is why I won't practice litigation anymore, is it's confidential. So if you have a client who's dissatisfied and you sit down in mediation and work out an agreement, it's between you and them. Nobody else needs to know. For veterinarians, it's huge because their license isn't reviewed.
Right.
So for me, the ability to take a minute in mediation, or to take a course that gives you especially if you're in the pet service industry, there is no one more emotional. You could have the most competent doctor, lawyer, Indian chief walk in to pick up their dog, and if something happened to their dog, they're going to go into orbit because it's like their child. And so you have to have the skill set, which is what I teach in my courses and in my workshops and in my webinars. It's the ability to just take a step back and breathe, because it is the hardest thing to do. But if you're in the practice of pet care, pet management, pet training, it'll really do your business a huge service, because not only will you not escalate the conflict, you'll learn from it. You'll go, wow, I didn't realize that when I said this, it set Gila off in a way that she really was upset. And I've got to recognize that when I say that or do that, that people might take it the wrong way, not as I intended. Maybe I need to do a little more setup.
Yeah, that's really, that's powerful stuff. In fact, it's not even just valid for what, for professionals in terms of just human interaction, all the relationships that we have with a spouse.
Right, exactly. It helps with all of that, but I only keep it with animals because, quite frankly, if I opened it to all of mediation, I would be buried alive. And in divorce, it's one of the most difficult areas to mediate because, I mean, even Jennifer Aniston, when she was doing her prenup, wanted to put in the prenup that she got both dogs if something happened to the marriage and they got divorced. And her soon-to-be husband said, but wait a minute, I understand you had that dog before we even met, but we bought this dog together. And Bloomberg interviewed me. They had 3 divorce attorneys and me on what to do with the pet. And now in Illinois, they just passed that they're going to take the best interests of the dog into consideration in divorce. And that's great. If they have both parties recognize that the best interests of the pet is that both parties have connection to that pet, unless one is abusive. And most of the time, nobody's abusive. It's just that one takes care of the dog more than the other. But if something happened to you, so I go into this in the MAP plan, which is navigating the journey your pet takes if something happens to you. So you're going on a business trip, gets delayed. You're sick, you have to go to the hospital. You're going on vacation, whatever it is. If you maintain some relationship with your ex, your dog or cat is going to make an easier transition while you're away from caring for them if you've kept some sort of consistent relationship with your ex. Bloomberg was funny because in the bold print in the article, they took mine, which I have to tell you is something I quote all the time. Unfortunately, your pet doesn't hate your ex. It would be great if they did. But if you put your ex in a room of strangers, your pet would go to your ex. So if that's the case, you really should think about whether or not you should put your ego away and let your ex maybe not have the dog every other weekend, which could be a little troublesome, but when you're on vacation, one weekend a month, something that maintains that relationship. And that's for two reasons. The pet has a place to go, so it doesn't have to go to a kennel. And if something happens to you, the pet has a place to go. It's not, willy-nilly. And third, if the pet needs medical care and you're not the deep pocket. Here in New York, we've had 2 cases where the non-working spouse was awarded the pet in the best interest of the pet because they spent most of the time with the pet. And I wrote an article and I sent my book to both the judges. And I said, you would have better served this animal had you mediated, because we could have discussed the care that would be taken of the animal if we shared, as opposed to if we egotistically said, I do a better job. I, of course, do a better job taking care of the dogs than my husband. My husband doesn't even know where the dog chow is. But I know that if something happened to me, my husband and then the 3 other people I have lined up would be able to take care of the pet. And really, we should, when we get divorced, recognize that there might be, and it might not work out. I've had 2 divorces where they had shared custody. They shared the dog once a month. And at the 3rd or 4th month, it was like clockwork. The other parent didn't really want to put up with the dog because it was an encumbrance. And so you've worked it out. But yet, when vacations come, that person takes the dog because they miss them. And the dog misses them too. So that's my thought when it comes to divorce. I know that people want to fight and go down that nobody's ever going to get my dog. But you're married, Gila. You have pets. Which one of your pets would not pick your husband over a stranger?
Probably Henry, because he can't see. No, I'm just joking. No, they both would pick.
Right. And how much does he do? Does he do a lot with them?
No.
Yeah, neither does mine. Mine are all red. So my husband doesn't even know who's who. So it's really bad.
John's great. I mean, he really enjoys walking and doing things with Bolo that way. We always go together for our evening hikes and whatnot. But I mean, like, yes, I have to write out everything and make sure he knows, like you said, he knows what the food is, but.
Yeah. Mine doesn't even know how to feed them. But yet I know that my dogs would pick him over a stranger and pick my sons over a stranger. So it's up to us as the main caregivers to put down the information needed. That's why we have those free webinars every month so people remember or at least consider writing down what they do for their pets. Because if it's all up here, it's of no use if you end up in the hospital after, God forbid, a car accident or you're delayed or whatever. It really is important.
So I want to ask something about this. I understand, and I did not research this prior to this interview, but I recall from the past that this time of year is actually a heightened rise in separation and divorce. Am I correct in that? Okay, so I was right in reading that.
You are absolutely right, because you got through the holidays and now I want to get rid of you because you were so inconsiderate or you didn't get me the present I wanted or whatever.
Or it's coming up and you stayed together because it was the holidays and that was like
right. Exactly.
So when people are first decide, okay, we're going to do this mediation thing, what percent are purely pet owners and what percent have, pets and kids, would you say? And is there a difference in terms of the level of mediation when there's kids involved?
Well, yeah, because the kids are covered by law and the pets aren't. So there's a total difference. If you won't play ball in mediation over your kids, well, then there is this law and these statutes that you have to abide by. Where with pets, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. So if you don't go to mediation, some judges are animal lovers and want to get involved with who's the better caregiver and who's this. Well, that's great. And there are better caregivers, but sharing is always better for the pet, both for expenses and for vacation caregiving. And people have made it a cottage industry, traveling dogs between exes, especially in big cities like New York. You have the taxis, you have daycares, you have the dog walkers who will take the dog from point A to point B. I will never have to see my husband again. My dog walker would move my dogs from point A to point B.
I was going to ask about that because I was curious if when going through a divorce, if there's, so much resentment and anger that is built up into that, if the mediation helped soften that the anger between the two, and that they ended up having a different type of post marital relationship as a result of the dog, or still so tumultuous. So you're saying that in many cases it still is, that they just don't have to deal with the person. They can just shuttle the dog back and forth.
And see, mediation does soften up both parties, because they get, if the mediator is not what we call a directive mediator who walks in and says, okay, what do you want? What do you want? I mean, there are different kinds of mediators, and you really should shop around for a mediator who lets you tell your story. A mediator who doesn't want to listen to the emotion of the conflict, which is you telling your story. Run for the hills if your story involves an animal, because quite frankly, that's what mediation helps do when animals are involved in a conflict, whether it be with your neighbor and the barking dog, whether it be with your trainer, whether it be with your spouse or your whatever. If you can't tell your story and they can't tell their story, there are no laws really that are going to cover whatever's going to happen with your pet. What's better is to listen to both sides and then work together to find a resolution that actually serves all the parties and the pet. I sit down and listen to all the animal welfare people rescuing dogs in this cold weather and things like that. And I sit there and go, well, let's try to figure out how we can stop this from happening again. Because if you take this dog from this person who tied it out in the cold weather, do you not think that they're going to go out and get another dog? So let's see if we can walk in and we can say, listen, we'd love to give you an igloo house if you don't want your Siberian Husky in the house because he sheds too much. And then if that is available, the dog at least has some protection. We all have our own way of caring for our dogs, and that's something that comes into play as well when you're in mediation. You can talk about that as opposed to litigation where it is right, wrong, that's it. We take it or we leave it. If you have a veterinarian who comes in and says the dog is in good shape even though he's living outside in the freezing cold because he's of that breed, the courts aren't going to do anything for you. So you've lost. And then the person will say, I'm going to have you arrested on trespassing, so don't come back to my house. What's better? Providing them with a house that provides the animal with shelter and heat and water and things like that, or cutting off all sorts of information. I'm now working with a feral cat group because they're having trouble with the town. And it's because nobody understands feral cats. Nobody understands where they come from, how they're cared for, how the trap, neuter, and release program works. So we're going to sit down in a community situation. Hopefully a lot of people will come who have questions. We'll answer them, and we'll start a dialogue so that the cats can stay where they are safely in shelters that are left there. And people will understand they're not causing problems, but actually likely helping with the vermin population in town.
So the other thing I wanted you to address, and I'm curious about how this works, is in living situations. If you have a neighbor, a conflict as a result of a dog, let's say it's a conflict because the dog, I can imagine there's so many different scenarios. The dog is left outside because the people are at work or whatever, and the dog's barking, or in the house or in the apartment, or somebody, a dog poops on somebody else's yard. How do you best address those types of conflicts? And what kinds in the housing arena do you most see?
Well, there are many because, of course, now we have the no-pet buildings who are required to allow emotional support animals in with the appropriate documentation. So in my practice, if we have neighbors with barking dogs or neighbors whose dogs knock down the little kids in the neighborhood or neighbors whose dogs attack other dogs in the neighborhood, we in mediation, we create the environment in which the neighbors can sit down as a group, and it's not attack the dog owner with the bad dog, but rather bring in not only the neighbors, but dog trainers and veterinarians to talk about what can be done to help this dog live a better life, training or at a minimum, if somebody is afraid or if somebody's been bitten, maybe agree to wear a muzzle, and have the trainer teach the dog how to wear a muzzle as a positive thing, not as a negative thing. So there's a lot of things that can be done in mediation because it's confidential. We're all talking together and throwing out ideas. Nobody's being told, you're crazy, you're crazy. Even if I usually have a big Post-it note whiteboard that I take them off as we list them, I take them off and stick them on a wall because people give me suggestions, and some are outrageous, like just put the dog to sleep. But in order to get past that mentality, you have to appreciate it. You have to acknowledge that that's one of the things we could do. We could put the dog to sleep. It's not going to satisfy a number of people here, especially the dog's owners. But okay, that is one thing we could do. And if you acknowledge it, the person who says it feels as if, okay, they're listening to me. And then they're more willing to listen to someone else. If I don't feel listened to, if people appreciate how I feel about the dog, I'm not going to listen to the way somebody else feels because they're not giving me respect. So sometimes it's a case of everybody has to feel respected in the room, and sometimes they only feel respected by me. That's okay. At least they feel respected by one person in the room. And then we move to what is in the best interests of all, and then we move to solution. It's an interesting process. And in the emotional support animals in no pet buildings, I have to tell you, I think we spoke about this before we got on, but there are so many wonderful things that animals are doing now that is sight unseen, both as emotional support animals, which are not covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, and service animals, which are covered by the Americans with Disability Act, which is a whole huge amount of information that protects the person with the dog, protects the dog going everywhere. Emotional support animals are only allowed on airplanes and in apartments. Service dogs are allowed everywhere. We could do a whole nother 45 minutes or an hour on emotional support and service animals. Happy to do it. I actually gave a 40-hour mediation on how to handle those conversations. But
let's do that for further down the road.
Absolutely, because I've created the program Accommodate the Accommodators. So here you are. You're in. I'm sorry. Did you?
I was just going to say there's.
Accommodate the Accommodators. So here you are in a no-pet building. You bought in a no-pet building maybe just because, or maybe you're allergic or afraid, or your kids are afraid or whatever. And here's this beautiful golden retriever now living next door. And the guy has kids, and you're like, this guy doesn't need this dog. He, had a friend who was a psychiatrist who wrote a letter and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? You can't ask him what service the animal does. You simply can say, does this animal supply you with an emotional support? And they say yes. And in service animals, you can't ask them what they provide. You just ask them, do they provide a service? And they say yes. And people don't believe them. There's a big, somewhat misuse of these terminologies. So people have to be a little more honest too. However, I do the Accommodate the Accommodators, where I ask management, instead of making the person who wants the dog hire an attorney, get involved with litigation, get sued, have to defend themselves. I usually, and it works beautifully, I have testimonials about it. You sit down and you say, okay, you have these letters that say that you can have an emotional support animal. What could you do to accommodate the people who are accommodating you? We're willing to accommodate you in any way, any manner. And by law, you can't really ask anyone with an emotional support animal not to do something. But if you don't make them hire an attorney to prove that they should have this dog because they have the documentation, you can read it. Most of my clients are willing to take the elevator at a different time, keep their cat in a cat carrier or their dog in a crate if they're going through common areas, take a back elevator if in fact there is one. There's so many things, and most of my clients on the other side who have the emotional support animals go, is that all they want me to do? That's easy, I'll do that. But nobody ever has that conversation. They just speak about no and yes, and so it just gets to be ugly.
So how can more people find out about utilizing these services? We can go to your website, but are there other resources for people? So, you actually do this not just locally. You're available to do this all over the country, all over the world, right?
All over the world, yep. I do this internationally. In fact, I'm working with a group in London who has just brought mediation to veterinary practices in the Royal Vet College Society, and I'm hoping to do the same thing here in the United States, where mediation will be the first step in having a conversation with your veterinarian. So you don't have to hire an attorney just to have a conversation with your veterinarian. I'm working on that. That hopefully will be done by mid-2018 if my luck holds out, and I know it will because I just believe. Everyone can email me at info@hamiltonlawmediation.com. I'm sure that they can find my contact information on your site, or I can give it to them here.
Into the comments here, info at
Hamilton Law, LAWNAND Mediation, MEDIATION.com. I know, believe me, if I could have shortened that, but every single permutation that made any sense was taken. So I apologize, everyone. Every month I hold the MAP plan for free. So if you go to Hamilton Law Mediation, you can sign up for free. You get an ebook that helps you put together all the information you need to set up a plan for your pet. I help you step by step. I talk to over 50 groups, who live in these facilities where they're taken care of completely. They're not hospital bound; they're independent living, but they get their meals cooked for them, which sometimes I wish I could get cooked for me. So I talk to them about their pets, because a lot of them, you said something at the beginning about how older people, they don't know the pets are so important to them. And I just got finished talking to a whole group of geriatric planners who take parties from independent living with their pets to skilled care living. And they don't know what to do with the pets. And I said, well, the transition would be so much smoother if they could take their pets with them. And I can help you make a plan that enables people in the area to come and care for the pet if you can't care for it. So if you want a dog or a cat, but you can't walk it because you can't walk, well, as I said, there's cottage industries everywhere, so you could pay it forward. Or it could be a Girl Scout, Boy Scout kind of thing. It's just simply a matter of thinking about how to care for the pet when you can't care for it. And believe me, if you're older, the thought of not having a dog, I don't know about you, Gila, but the thought of me not having a dog is a day I just want to close my eyes, because I've had dogs since I was 3. I had a German Schnauzer, and then it was Irish Setters the whole way. So my thought is I'll have Irish Setters until they put Irish quarters on my eyes. But if you want a dog, you really need to make sure you put in place those caregivers, because you never know if you're going to get a cold, a flu. I broke my leg, which is how I wrote the MAP plan. You think the story about how I got into mediation was funny. The MAP plan came out of the fact that I broke my ankle in 2013 and had 9 dogs in the basement, a flight of stairs down. Wow. No plan. I had a plan in my will, and I used to call the program "I'm Not Dead Yet," because most people say, Debra, I'm all set in my will. I go, well, it's a good thing you're going to die, because that's what you need to do in order for all that information to get out of your will and care for your pet. If you have a stroke or you have cancer or something else, that doesn't come to fruition.
Right. Okay, so everybody out there, you can go to the link that we've just provided.
Thank you.
You want to access the MAP plan. You want to put that into place. Very important. It's something you sort of think, oh, it's something I need to do, and you just aren't doing it. You need to go out there and just make that happen. And then also you have the webinars for information as well. And if any of you out there are having any challenges that do require mediation, you want to prevent going to litigation, then go ahead and reach out to Debra. This is her area of expertise. And if not you, you may know somebody that you can refer for you. So we're going to have to wrap up here in just a second, but I did want to say thank you. The work that you do is so good, mostly for the animal, but more also very specifically for the people involved. I mean, nobody feels good in angry and resentful and hurtful situations, whether that's with a spouse, a family member, a neighbor, or a professional. So this is a great course of action. So please check out her website, and if you have any questions, you can email her directly or reach out to us. And then if you haven't already registered to win the free giveaway for the show this week, the Love the Mutt You're With, you can do that at the link below. We usually pick a winner a little later. And for those of you on the East Coast and the Northeast, stay warm, stay dry. We will be thinking of you. And Debra, I wish you the very best as we kick into 2018. And you have a great year ahead. And congratulations on all the amazing things that you're doing currently.
Thanks so much, Gila, for this opportunity. And thank you to everyone who listened. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write.
All right. Great. Have a great day. Take care, everybody.
Mm-hmm.